When black people wake up and become intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, as other humans are intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, then the black man will think like a black man, and he will feel for other black people. And this new thinking and feeling will cause black people to stick together.
We're going beyond Black History Month and getting to the money at the Mental Dialogue Live experience, as we've dubbed February as Black Business and Financial Strategy Month. Legacy isn't luck, it's strategy, and business grows through connection. Learn wealth strategies from financial coach Ashonda Davis and wealth educator Denise Muldrew. Business owners come out and learn how to get connected and more exposure with insight from Melvin Coleman, president of the Atlanta Black Chamber, and finally discover why every family with young children should have Monopoly game nights. Friday, February 20th, 7 p.m. at Urban Grind. Get all details at mentaldialogue.com. If we bring smart and good people together, smart and good things happen.
The estate plan would include.
What's up, everybody? It's your mental activist, Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates, bringing back the mental dialogue perspective. If you are a long-time follower, you know we used to rock audio only on Blog Talk for 8 years, but every now and then I do pop-up shows here on YouTube, and I bring on some of my long-time guests, intellectuals. As I like to say, we're the place for the smart people. And so I got a couple of very smart people on here with me, returning guests. I'm gonna always start with my queen LaTrice, who's been holding me down for really a big portion of the 8 years. I think probably rocked with me for about 6 years on Blog Talk. And she's still, when I call her, if she's up, I got her.
That's me.
So LaTrice, if you will, say hello to any of the intellectual outcasts, as I like to call those who watch this show. Let them know who you are. Then we'll introduce my brother, Chief X, who's been on the show many a times as well.
Sure. I'm LaTrice Ross. I've been a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional since around 2015, before it was the popular thing. I do consulting, and I'm happy, ecstatic to discuss this topic, particularly during Black History Month.
Nah, good stuff. Somebody says peace, so peace to that brother or sister, whoever said that. Chief X, you don't really need an introduction if any of your followers are here, but for those that may not know you yet or have heard you and I on the show, and we've done lots of shows together. I've been on your platform, you've been on mine plenty of times, but if you will, however you want to introduce yourself, please do so, and we'll get started on this morning's dialogue.
Yes, sir. See what we got. Cuban crisis in the chat.
Yep.
So yes, my name is my name is Xavier, but I go by my nickname is Chief X. I'm up out of Los Angeles, California, the West Side.
Represent.
And I work in the cannabis industry, and just got my little notary, so I'm a notary public now too.
Right. Good stuff. Glad to see you on board, man. I've been rocking for 7 years. About to come up on my 8th year on the Mobile Notary Atlanta 24/7 Mobile Notary, so I'll shout myself out as well.
By the way, how you doing, LaTrice?
Hello, how are you?
Okay. Good stuff. All right, y'all. For anybody out there watching, let me tell you how we do this show. We basically play cuts in reference to the discussion, and today's discussion is racism, dead or alive. Racism, dead or alive. If you didn't see the promo, I want to give a little context, and we're going to start with cuts and get our basically both our guests give their perspective. And that's our goal here, is to have actual dialogue. We're not here to yell beliefs at each other, but have dialogues about the perspective. And so again, today's discussion question, if you will, is racism, dead or alive. The context I would like to give is we're not simply exploring, does racism still exist? So let's just kind of get that off the table. We're talking about, is racism effective? Is it being used against African Americans, or is it no longer a real obstacle per se in the way that it used to be used when it was more overt, if you will? And so that's kind of the context of that question: racism, dead or alive. And so here's the first cut that I would like to play and, in a sense, get y'all perspective as we delve through today's discussion. This is from Joshua Dash DOS Discourse is his IG page, so to give him his credit. But this is something that I kind of threw out that I've seen this done, just to give a little more context. This has been done over the years. Every 5 to 10 years, this example that you're about to see gets done. And so I wanted to see if it was still a viable issue currently when it comes to this discussion question: racism, dead or alive.
Let's discourse, shall we?
Stanford did a study where they sent out thousands of duplicate resumes to Fortune 500 companies. Half of these fake resumes had black sounding names like Tyrell and Lamar. The other half had white sounding names like Walker and Bobby. Half of the black applicants had a felony on their resume. Half did not. Half of the white applicants had a felony on their resume. Half did not.
About 34% of whites with no criminal record received a callback or job offer. In the case of black testers, 14% of those with no criminal background received a callback or job offer. But the most surprising finding was really related to blacks with no criminal background relative to whites with a felony conviction. We find that a white applicant with a felony conviction fared just as well, if not better, relative to a black applicant with a clean record.
A white applicant with a felony conviction got callbacks at a higher rate than a black applicant with the same resume that didn't have a felony conviction.
This suggests that being black in America today is essentially like having a felony conviction in terms of one's chances of finding employment.
This is structural racism.
I've been hearing this example, and this study has been done over and over again throughout the years. So when we ask the question, is racism dead or alive? LaTrice, I'll start with you. Again, we keep seeing that consistent example. What say you?
I kind of rolled my eyes when you started talking, because as you said, that's one example that's been used often. But the fact that it's been used often simply proves that I call it administrative racism. Still shows itself. It shows itself differently. One of the things you said in your opening was about overt racism. We may not see it overtly, but it's built into the systems that allow us to navigate life, and that has an impact.
Chief X, any thoughts on that example? I'm pretty sure you've been hearing those examples throughout your years. That's one of the latest one that Josh Discourse, a younger data analyst, is what his background is. And so that's something that he recently brought forward. Your thoughts about that structure, or as LaTrice says, administrative racism still being something that we face. Your thoughts about that?
I hear what they're saying. I understand it was a study they done. I think, for instance, when I was a realtor, and people used to come see the home that I had listed for sale. There's many times where me as a black man, a black couple may come in, check out the house. A Mexican couple may come check out the house. And me and the owner may get together and choose which one. And sometimes we choose just based on how we feel about the people buying the home. Like, this was a nice black couple, and they had a nice little cute daughter and son, and let's choose them. So I just think people are kind of biased to their own people if it's their company or if they're in charge or so, for instance. Personally, me, I never had problems going on a job interview and getting a job. I used to say I'll take the job. My son, who is 26 now, he's never had any problems when he applied for a job. Usually 1 or 2 interviews and they love him, right? So I think it's a personality thing. So sometimes I don't understand the study. They said they sent in a resume or whatever, and some such and such got a call back. I mean, it's kind of impersonal. Like, in situations like this for applying for a job, I think it's your personality that gets the job, your salesmanship, or if you win them over from what you say in an interview. I think a personal interview would work out better.
No, actually, I can agree with the personal interview part. Here's where I think you're skipping, and then I get obviously let LaTrice give her thoughts on it. But what I think you're skipping over is actually getting the interview. And that's kind of what I think the study that's where it stands, because it says what they do is, and again, this has been done a million times, but this is just one of the more recent ones. But what they're doing is sending out basically the same surveys sent at different times. They'll do the study over 6 months or whatever, maybe even longer sometimes, but they'll just basically randomly send the same survey, and the only thing they change is the name, and they may do the felony background, but it basically will have the same resumes but sent so far apart that who's ever looking at them is not noticing, oh, this is the same resume I saw 4 months ago. And so the study is strictly on the callbacks. So I respect getting in the interview and showing yourself and getting the job, but just talking about how, unfortunately, how prevalent it is that even a white person with a felony, these same resumes are getting callbacks to even get the personal interview that you're talking about, even before someone with typically it's usually what I've seen in most studies is usually associate degrees definitely don't get the callbacks before the white felon. I'm saying that's what some other studies that I've seen. But go ahead, LaTrice. I'm just kind of clarifying the difference of what I think you're missing when you say personal interview. This is specifically about the callbacks. Go ahead, LaTrice.
Right. And so I actually wrote when he started speaking, but how many times has your resume or your application been passed over? Because you don't know that. And when he was speaking, he said he thinks sometimes that people go off of their own personal bias. And therein lies the problem. Is that bias because that's a Black sounding name? Because I'm LaTrice instead of Jennifer. And that's the problem.
So let me say this to you as well as we deep dive into this, LaTrice. So what I think, you have to acknowledge that personal bias creates some of the structural stuff, right? Like that's kind of your point.
Absolutely.
I'll say this as my however is, it's almost like the reason you put things in place is because that natural bias exists. But at the same time, I think when you say that's the problem, I think people think that we're saying as Black people that we don't understand that bias is there. Like we actually understand that bias is there, and I don't think you as a diversity consultant actually believe that you could actually weed that bias out of everyone. So I think Chief X is correct when he says it's kind of natural to want to choose your own on your own people, that nepotism is something that in a sense is going to be accepted in society. I think people think that we don't accept that it's in society from a naive standpoint, where the argument often is why we have something structurally in place to kind of ease back some of that nepotism, whether it's selecting your own race or your own ethnicity. Am I making sense with some of what I'm saying? Either one of y'all.
Right. I understand your perspective, but I want to say that I don't think that they don't think that it's us who doesn't understand that bias. It's them who likes to think that they don't have that bias.
Any thoughts on that, Chief X? Just curious.
Some like in discussions like this, sometimes we get into wanting to point the finger at a people, but then it becomes a competition. Are they more racist than we are, and things like that? I think the bias would go both ways. If we were the majority owning the companies, and we were doing the hiring, that some of these statistics may remain the same. Like I have a friend who owns a restaurant. When people applied to work in the kitchen, the Black guy at the restaurant was choosing Mexicans to work in the kitchen. So that was his bias. I think we all have them. You know what I mean? So it can go either way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I actually agree with that to a degree. And when I say to a degree, it's just I think sometimes when we talk race, we are devoid of what I would say is those natural biases. Like we have the conversation without a full consideration for those natural human biases. And so when you have, in my opinion, when you have these conversations without considering the natural end bias, sometimes we'll reduce something to race that is actually human nature. And so I think that is part of the conversation that we, should have as well. I'm going to play another clip unless either one of you have something else to say.
I'll save it.
Okay, sounds good. All right, let's move into this next clip.
What's the race industry that you talk about?
Oh, heavens, there's so many of them. There's the NAACP, which once played a very important role. But one of the problems with any institution that has one goal is that once they've achieved that goal, they don't say, all right, folks, we'll have a going out of business ceremony. They have to go on. The EEOC, for example, when they're there to prevent discrimination. But as discrimination declines, they have to expand the definition of discrimination so that now if you don't want to hire people who have been in prison, they think that's discrimination.
You write in Intellectuals in Race that the kind of society to which that can lead, when you talk about the race industry, et cetera, and emotion, is one in which a newborn baby enters the world supplied with prepackaged grievances against other babies born the same day.
Yes. Yes. This idea that you can redress history, which we see in a specific context in this country, it's around the world. I mean, the Czechs, when they first formed Czechoslovakia after the First World War, one of the goals they had was to redress the injustices of the 17th century. You know, nobody from the 17th century was alive at the end of the First World War. And so and they tried to take this out by having policies that would favor the Czechs over the Germans and so on. And they set in motion a chain of events in which Czechs and Germans were both worse off than they had ever been before, and both were victims of tragedy, trying to undo what happened to people who are now long dead.
Do we have policies in this country that are formed the same way?
Oh, yes. Yes,
yeah,
we're one of many affirmative action, the demand for reparations, and so on. One of the sad things is that we talk in this country as if slavery was something unique to the United States or to blacks and whites. And in point of fact, slavery was one of the oldest institutions among human beings. They go back as far as there is recorded history. And in every single part of the world, Polynesians enslaved other Polynesians. For most of history, people enslaved people who were the same race as themselves for the simple reason that they simply didn't have the resources to go to another continent and take people from another continent and move them en masse someplace else. But late in history, this is what happened in the United States and in the Western Hemisphere. Many things, much of the pathology of the black community today is said to be a legacy of slavery. The irony is, if you look at facts, for example, the breakdown of the family. Most black kids grew up in homes with two parents under slavery itself and for generations thereafter. And as late as the 1960s, most black children grew up in two-parent homes. It's only when you start in with the massive Great Society, so-called, and other such things, that you see the family that had survived all of this for all this time now begin to disintegrate.
From Intellectuals in Race, Dr. Thomas Sowell, there is other evidence that the black subculture has a negative effect on intellectual achievement. In other words, brighter black students do not perform as well in settings where there are many other black students around them, contrary to the theory that what is needed in educational institutions is some larger critical mass of black students.
Yes. There are studies which I cite in there which show that. So it's not just my opinion of the whole thing. One of the studies I did many years ago was of a school, Dunbar High School in Washington, which was a very outstanding all-black academic institution. And over the years, from 1892 to 1954, something like, I forget the number now, 34, I think it was, graduates of Dunbar High School went to Amherst College. Very few at any given time, so there was never a critical mass, so-called, there. 3/4 of these kids graduated, and of those who graduated, more than 1/4 were Phi Beta Kappas. So clearly you don't need a critical mass. They never had anything resembling a critical mass. What you need is a good educational background and the absence of people who would distract you from what the real purpose of the college is.
Chief X, I'll let you give your thoughts on Thomas Sowell for those who may not be familiar with him.
That's my man, Thomas. So, I just kind of came across him maybe about 8 years ago, and I hadn't heard of him before that. So I began to start to listen to Thomas Sowell. And just by the way, whoever listened, I consider myself a conservative. Um, so he was one of the persons who kind of helped me kind of move to the conservative side. And I enjoy what he says. And I agree what he says about slavery because I've done about 5 presentations recently on YouTube about how Africans sold Africans into slavery. And the whole story is kind of different than what I grew up learning about. So all people enslaved others or got enslaved. That's just around the world. I kind of agree with that. Um, it's just that ours was kind of recent and upfront and personal. You know what I mean? Um, and at the time, there was 2 million whites enslaved in North Africa by Berbers, right? So, and a lot of times when we talk about slavery, we're in a competition. Well, our slavery was worse. Well, their slavery wasn't like our slavery. And I mean, slavery is slavery, and it's all wrong. You know what I mean? So everyone has experienced it. Um, and I think he also spoke on. I didn't totally understand what he was saying. He was talking about schools and certain groups of people going to a school and who was more successful.
Yep, I'll break that part down to you just real quick, and I'll
Okay.
go to LaTrice. So the latter part, Thomas Sowell is a brilliant thinker, right? But it doesn't mean that all of us can make mistakes. And so what I would highlight, given the information on the school stuff, so the thing that I'll highlight, he was just talking about the guy that asked him a question about there was this concept that basically if African Americans went together in mass, that they would succeed together. Like they would do better if they were going to school in mass. And the funny part is I watched Sowell he cited some studies that he had looked at, but the funny part was he contradicted himself in his own answer because he highlights that the 34 blacks that did well at Amherst College and how well they did, like a fourth had graduated with honors, he basically highlighted. But he's looking that they had come from, he highlighted himself, Dunbar all-black school. So they had, and he highlights that as long as you have a good educational background, that's going to be the thing that helps you succeed, because the question was that blacks didn't do well amongst one another. And I'm sitting here going, he doesn't even realize he's contradicted himself in his own answer because they got the good background that he highlighted from an all-black school. So again, he's a brilliant mind, but that's one of the misses that I saw. And one other reference into slavery, because I saw I was able to see your face, LaTrice. The audience couldn't see it when he highlighted the 2 parents near the end of enslavement. Because we were breeding here in America, so near the end of the enslavement, it was typical for the children to be in the home with both parents. And near the end, it definitely didn't start that way, but once they got. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. But go ahead, LaTrice.
I understand because words matter, and that statement was disingenuous.
Yep, fair enough. But go ahead and jump in and give your thoughts on what.
So there are a couple of things. So to Chief X, yes, Africans sold other Africans into slavery, but selling captives is not the same as creating chattel slavery, which brings me to my next point. While slavery has existed in many various places, regions of the world, chattel slavery was distinctly different. And to attempt to say that slavery was everywhere and other demographics participated in slavery, it erases the impact that chattel slavery had. And so we need to understand the difference in that, because you can say, yo, yes, yes, the Irish were enslaved, or this demographic was enslaved, but it was distinctly different in its inhumane treatment, in the fact that people were treated as property and not people, that it was racialized, and it was permanent, and it was tied explicitly to race. So that makes it distinctly different. Additionally, the way that they were treated, and the fact that it was industrialized at scale and maximized to engage in profit. So it was distinctly different from every other form of slavery that has ever existed. And to say otherwise is to diminish what actually happened.
I kind of disagree on that, because I've done so many presentations on it, and and people claim that it was chattel slavery here, but it wasn't chattel slavery. I think that's a bunch of crock, right?
Why?
It was chattel slavery also in Africa. Africans was enslaving Africans before they even seen a white man or seen an Arab, right? And I even went to so far as to say slavery in West Africa was worse than here in the Americas.
Do you know
many of the women was getting raped? No white man came in then to get anybody. They've been doing this business for years. It's called a Trocosi system. TROSKO, Trocosi system. Right now in 2026, it's still slavery going on in West Africa, and they're enslaving each other. Little young girls are being raped right now. They're paying for what their great granddaddy did, and it's hereditary. And hereditary is part of chattel slavery. It's hereditary. It's passed down and forever. So anyone can look up the Trocosi slave system and see it's still going on. They've been doing this before they even seen a white man.
The slavery in Africa there's no evidence to prove that the slavery in Africa was the same as chattel slavery.
There's a lot of proof. I got this book right here. It's called Indigenous Slavery in Ghana. It's a great book. I think people should.
I don't see chattel slavery in that title.
No, it doesn't say chattel slavery. This is what I'm saying. A lot of times here in America, we want to be in competition on whose slavery was worse. That's what I said. So it was going down, and all that gold in the Gold Coast. Guess who mined all that gold? Who was dying getting that gold?
It does not negate
so
what chattel slavery was not.
Chattel slavery was here in Ghana, in West Africa. They sold each other, and it was hereditary. They had the Salaga slave market. Just look it up. Salaga slave market. Let me just finish my
war captives. It was debt bondage, and it was domestic servitude.
And this is exactly the same thing that was going on in Ghana, and much, much more.
I know that what I just said was going on in Ghana.
Yeah. Chattel slavery.
That's not chattel slavery, though.
Hereditary. They bought and sold.
Not chattel slavery. They
done the exact same thing.
Not the same.
Hard labor, all the same.
Let me jump in real quick. If you will. And so I will say, T-Vex, to a degree, you're doing what you say we do, which is talking about it from a competition standpoint. Now, I get respect that you're bringing that history that a lot of us as African Americans are completely unaware of, because I remember you took your trip, got that book, and that book has served as a great resource talking about specifically what enslavement was in Africa. So from that standpoint, but when you're dialoguing this way, you're actually in the competition and missing what I would offer is the distinct difference of chattel slavery from two areas, from a property standpoint and the aspect of removal from your land. What I'm not doing, just to be clear here, what I'm not doing is trying to just say which slavery was worse. That's not why I'm pointing out those differences. LaTrice's point that I'll back her up on is she's talking about the actual impact of how different the American global form of enslavement, scaled in the way that it was, how different it has on the progeny thereafter. It's a huge difference based on the specifics of what happened with chattel slavery and making them property and institutionalize it in your government as a different, to the point where you have to actually fight to even be recognized as a citizen. So that impact is very different, partly due to the time that it happened, the geography, and I think all LaTrice is saying is highlighting that difference. It's not an argument of which slavery was worse. I don't think that's definitely not her argument. So LaTrice, I'll let you speak for yourself, but I just wanted to give some context versus y'all just going back and forth.
So Montoya, this whole conversation really is about impact, because I think that the question isn't does racism still exist?
Right.
The question is actually whether race still predicts outcomes in the country. And so if race still predicts outcomes, then that means racism is still an issue.
All right, I'm gonna run to another clip unless Chief X has a response to that.
I think people also have to understand that I like to make a difference between racism and systematic racism, right? Racism will always be here when my great grandkids are born, right? Human beings are always gonna have their feelings and biases and opinions of what they like and what they dislike and who they like and who they dislike. That will be here till the end of time. So there will always be racism from all the different races to the end of time. So we have to be clear about that. Now, systematic racism is kind of a different thing and a different topic, but people are going to be racist.
No, it's not really.
Yeah, I think they are different in this sense. I'll use this quote from Stokely Carmichael. I don't think he had changed his name to Kwame Ture at the time he made this quote, and then we'll play this clip. He says, I don't care anything. I don't care about if a white man wants to lynch me.
Right.
It doesn't bother me at all. My only concern is if they have the power to. And so I think they are distinctly different in that sense, because I think Chief X is absolutely right. The individuals will, and it's never the goal to change what's in someone's heart. I think the way that we've learned about racism in the school system has that, like like just the way that we propagandize the history of the civil rights movement and how we highlight King, only certain parts of Dr. King, right? The character of my skin and the I have a dream speech. And so there is some type of perspective, and people are quick to call out the actual, especially right now, I would say less right now, but there was a point where being an overt racist was really frowned upon in society. I think those times are changing based on what we're seeing. And that's some of the dialogue that we go ahead, LaTrice.
So I'm not even here to talk about individual racism, because that matters not to me. If somebody doesn't like me because of the color of my skin, more power to you. You deal with that. I'm here to talk about the systemic issues that still exist. That's why my question was, if racism still has an impact on outcomes, then is racism dead? And I'm not talking about the individual. That's the racist systems that are built into our infrastructure. That's what I'm here to discuss.
No, fair enough. Let's play this quick. This is a very quick clip, so it won't be as long as the one from Thomas Sowell.
Winners of rigged games never admit to themselves that they won because the game was rigged. We all sit around, we throw a Monopoly board here in front of us, and we're all sitting here together. And the researcher says, TK, you are going to start with double the money. You're going to roll first. And each time it comes to you, you're going to roll twice. And everything else will just be like a normal game of Monopoly. Now, who's going to win that game of Monopoly?
Almost certainly TK.
Almost certainly. Yeah. He is going to win that game. All right. We start playing the game. Almost immediately, he pulls ahead. He started with twice the money. He rolls 2 times every time you roll. He pulls ahead. Do you know what he starts to do? The winner of the rigged game begins to eat more snacks, begins to talk shit. And at the end, when everyone is polled about why he won, we will all say he won because he had built-in advantages in the game. He rolled twice, he started with more money, etc. And he will say that he won because of his strategy. He will say that he outplayed us. This is human nature. It's been studied. Winners of rigged games never admit to themselves that they won because the game was rigged.
I think this is a very important clip for this conversation, because I think we're witnessing it as we start moving. We're going to move into some political cuts after this one, but I wanted to kind of set the stage with that one. LaTrice, I know you study human behavior, so I'm just interested in anything that you would like to add to what that brother says. But if I'm just like just trying to have this honest dialogue about understanding that some things that are human nature in America, we're racializing it, not understanding that this is just what humans do. That doesn't make it okay, but I think it's just a context that we do have to add to our conversation, because us as African Americans, sometimes on the bad end of things, we're just kind of pointing a finger saying that's what that group does, not realizing it's a human nature thing. And I think that actually matters sometimes. But go ahead, Queen.
It matters all the time, to be honest, because we have to take into account the impact of our physiological responses to things. Bias is natural. Our brains are designed to keep us safe. The brain believes that differences are dangerous and similarities are safe. The thing that we have to do, we have to move beyond that, recognize that that bias exists, and then understand how to take measures to overcome those tendencies towards similarities. Now, when it comes to competing and things of that nature, the fact is that white Americans got an over 400-year head start when it comes to building wealth. The fact of the matter is that even after the enslaved were freed, that former slave owners were offered reparations. So certain aspects of the system, if you will, were put us at a disadvantage. For instance, even when the income tax system was instituted, Black people paid into it, but could not benefit from it. And so we were paying into a system, monies were being taken out of the paltry income that we were earning at that time, and we could not benefit from any of the programs that citizens of this country were to get from that income tax. That income tax created the federal housing loans that built the white middle class, and Black people were not allowed to participate in that. Black people went to war and could not get educated through the GI Bill. So there were certain things that were structurally built into the system that impacted us. And people think that just because those times have passed, that those things still don't impact us, as if they operate in a silo and that those things don't still come back to haunt us. The fact that we don't have the generational wealth has to do with things that happened in the past. Now, yes, we can do presently to impact that, but the fact that they got that head start still has an impact. The fact that our ancestors gave free labor still impacts us.
And let me throw this in real quick, because like you said, it's not a solo, and this is just a side note real quick, just to give people something to think about. And so that's what people often miss in the civil rights to integration period, right? Like, it's the way that it's reframed as if we were, in a sense, wanting to be next to white people and that type of thing. And the reality was, it was taxation without representation, because just as you said. And so what happens is, when people say build on your own, I'm like, okay, we're going to be the group that builds on our own while our taxes are still taken out. That means we're paying double to build on our own, while others have the structure of the tax benefits to build whatever they may build. Like, that's the thing that gets missed when we look at the history in a silo. That's just a side note. But go ahead, Chief X. Any thoughts to what LaTrice said, or just again that cut, just highlighting this human nature to want to look at it like, I did this myself. I didn't have an advantage. That is human nature. But go ahead, Chief X.
Yeah, I agree with the guy. Things are rigged, for instance, my son played college football and has his bachelor's degree, right? He has friends that he's played with, and some of his friends now are coaching. So it's a lot of times just a regular guy applying for this coaching position is just not going to get it. My son is going to get it because he knows the other coaches, and they're going to be more, friendly to him and give him the job because they know he has a knowledge of football. So that can be an example of something that's rigged. You know what I mean? Friends help friends and things like that. And we all understand that things happened during slavery and prior to the civil rights era, which caused a huge wealth gap. Racism and systematic racism back in those days caused a wealth gap. But in today's time, I don't feel My son may be affected because, hey, I may not have land and property, so my son may not inherit that. Okay, cool. But my son is thriving. Um, he's thriving more so than other white kids his age. So I do believe he gets things based on his merit, right? I have a lady friend who has an 800 credit score. She can get anything she wants, just like anybody of any other race can get with her credit score. Like in today's time, you're basically just a number. So when she's applying for things and refinancing home loans or whatever she's doing, she gets the red carpet rolled out for her, just like anybody else would get the red carpet rolled out for them. So it's based on her credit score. Simple math. Um, like sometimes people say there's racism in the housing industry. Um, I'm a former realtor, former loan officer. Never ever have I ever ran into a lender who didn't want to make $10,000 and close a loan. They say, "Oh, I don't want to make no money because the person's black." I've never ran into that. In today's time, I'm talking about, or when I was a realtor, right? So everything is about the dollar today, and we just a number. But we understand things, and slavery and prior to civil rights affected us, and there's a wealth gap now. But I tell my son to be confident in all you do. Go get that job and take the job. Don't just go in an interview. Take the job.
And I tell my friends to have the
Let me
confidence
just
of a
finish this one last.
mediocre
Let
white
me
man,
just finish this
and
last. Let
they
me
can
finish
get
this.
the job too.
Let me finish this last sentence. So my son is thriving regardless, and he's confident. So he doesn't have any of these racial issues that we talk about. Tell he's not a victim. He doesn't run around with a victimhood mentality. He's good.
So I like to, it's a couple of things. Number one, personal anecdotes don't equate to anything. The broader studies actually do. So I'm kind of laughing because this is actually a waste of my time to even be discussing this with you, because the only thing you keep talking about is you're a realtor and your son is successful. I'm successful. My children are successful, but there's still success of a few does not negate the systemic issues that still exist. Something else you were saying, dang, it slipped my mind, but can we get to the research? Can we get to facts? Because I'm not going to try to negate your personal experiences. I can tell you my personal experience. Oh, I know what it was. You say that we play the race card. It's not the race card, because regardless of what has been done to keep us oppressed, the fact that redlining occurred, the fact that we are still likely to get higher interest in mortgage loans, the fact that we are still more likely to be denied for mortgage loans than white people, all of those things still happen today. But regardless of all of the systemic issues that are built into the system, we still overcome those things. So we are in no way playing the victim, and simply calling out the oppressive structures that still exist within the systems is not playing the race card. It's speaking up about those things that still impact us. We would have made greater strides towards generational wealth if we were paid equitably for the same work. But because we're not, that has caused us to not put as much of a dent in the generational wealth gap than we should. And who knows if your son in his coaching job is being paid the same thing as white coaches. Yes, he got the job because he knew the coaches. That's one example, but we don't know what they're paying other coaches. And that is the issue. I've seen the salaries. I've seen the experiences and the education. And more times than not, Black people with the same education, if not more, with the same experience, if not more, are paid less than, are more frequently not promoted. Typically, they even have to train the person that winds up being their direct supervisor. So I'd like to talk about facts and not anecdotes. Yes, we understand you were a realtor. Yes, we understand that you claim to not have experienced this, but I'd like to stick with the facts and research. Could we please?
And Docs Chief, I got an example of my 2 years of when I was a refinance officer. And so I know you were a realtor years before I was. But I remember something that was different by the time we had to qualify and take the test. I forgot what the name of the test was for at the time, but they had changed the ethics hours from 1 hour during the time when you were getting your license, and they had changed it to 3 hours. They added 2 more hours on the ethics portion of getting your license to be able to do the realtor stuff. The 2 hours that they added was from all the stuff that had happened up until 2008 in reference to the systemic stuff, such as the steering. Like these things were happening so broad that they actually had to say, okay, we got to teach the people that are in this industry to look out for these things because it was systemically happening so bad to African Americans and brown people as well. I even recall, like, for example, like I've highlighted this story before, but my uncle, and this is, I guess, to a degree, is anecdotal to the antithesis of what you said, but it's still I think this highlights the systemic stuff and not just the individual situation. But like my uncle came along when you could work for one company for 20, 30 years and retire or whatever. And so he was successful, did engineering, doing very well. And he lives on a street that's named after him. Like it's the street, just 'cause he was the first home, built the first home on the street. So we got to name the street. And so he's lived the American dream in the biggest way. But he still highlights at the time when he went to get his home, this is South Carolina, just to give you an idea where it's at. Had he been able to get the home, because he could afford the home, he could qualify for the home, but if he could actually get the home he wanted to get back then, but they wouldn't at that time, being in South Carolina, they wouldn't let him move to that neighborhood. He's doing very well now, but he goes, man, how much would I be worth if my home was over where I wanted to buy it but could not buy it? And that was probably in the late 80s. So prior to 2008, there's 2 more hours added to it just because of how systemic things were in the housing industry, specifically towards Black and brown people. So this is a little more information. Go ahead.
It's still systemic. Black neighborhoods are undervalued, same amenities, but if there's a majority Black population in that neighborhood, those homes in that neighborhood are more likely to be undervalued. Even today, people have to de-Black their homes before they get them appraised because they run the risk of having their homes appraised at a lower value. So the systemic issues, and these are facts. This is data. This is research that has been done in recent years to show that these issues exist. And so to his point, though, I want to say racism may not be the only obstacle that Black people face, but it is still one of the most consistent. And it is still typically something that we have to overcome. And it makes our path to success much steeper than others.
Good stuff. Go ahead, Chief.
So today is 2026. We understand about the past. Today, you have Black women taking former presidents to court and getting him convictions, felonies. If someone discriminates on you, nobody wants to be sued. No company wants to be sued at all. You can sue a company and win if you're discriminated against. Okay? I personally have never been oppressed. Okay? My son personally has never been oppressed. When you talk about the homes and appraisals and stuff, an appraiser just doesn't go willy-nilly and do what he wants and just mark a house down. He won't get called again to appraise another house if he's doing some janky, shady stuff like that. That's a good way to ruin. Let me finish, LaTrice.
No, I don't want to hear anecdotes.
No, let me finish. I'm making a point.
I'm not going to continue to do this.
I'm making a point. I'm
just not. It's ridiculous. He's talking about anecdotes. Nothing he said is debated.
Yeah, let him finish.
I don't see nobody here sharing their screen, showing the math in the data.
But I can.
Hold on, LaTrice. You gotta let somebody speak. We're sitting here just having a conversation. Now, if we was in a debate and we wanted to share our screens and show statistics, that we can do all that. but we're just having a conversation.
I didn't get up early and get dressed and have a conversation.
LaTrice, if you need to leave, I'll let you leave. If you're that frustrated, I don't.
Ridiculous.
Let everybody speak. Not calling each other ridiculous, like that's a waste of time. Like that part is a waste of time to me. Okay, well, if that's the case, LaTrice, I get, because I'm just wanting to have a dialogue and let.
Okay, let's have the dialogue. Go ahead on with your anecdote.
Okay, mental dialogue. The show's called.
Go ahead on with your anecdote.
So appraisers just don't go.
Snapping.
We're talking about the system. We're having a conversation. You mentioned appraisers. I'm mentioning appraisers. What's the difference?
Go ahead.
Okay, so appraisers just don't willy-nilly mark homes down. Homes prices are based off comparables in that neighborhood. Okay, so your home's going to be appraised for what, in general, the other homes in the neighborhood sold for. Okay, and homes are priced also based on crime in the neighborhood. Because because this house in Compton is just as nice as this house in Beverly Hills does not mean it's gonna sell for the same price. A lot of these appraisals and home prices in neighborhoods are based on crime. Now, if I'm a black person who has a home in Beverly Hills around a bunch of white people, my home is going to sell and appraise for just like everyone else's of any other races around you. That's how appraisers work in 2026. Now, if you was talking about 1950, I understand. But it's just
No, I'm gonna tell you this, Chief X, and we're gonna go to another cut and get in some of the politics. But I'm gonna tell you this.
And I like to give some data to that.
She's not talking about 1950. She's talking about, we're here in Atlanta just 2 years ago. They basically had to acknowledge that the nicer areas here in Atlanta are undervalued, where there is no crime, undervalued greatly. And they've actually did a study across the nation to say, hey, here's where these homes should be. And I'm not talking about what you just said, an example of one being in a bad neighborhood. Like in Atlanta, we definitely know the difference between the nice areas and the bad areas here in Atlanta. And we're majority black. But that same situation just 2 years ago was called out here in Georgia, that the nicer neighborhoods with low crime still will be an undervalued home buyer. There's plenty of data to back that up, just so you know. But like I said, we didn't do a bring the debate. We're not doing a bring the data. To your point, we're not doing that. But I will back her up and say there is current data in 2026 that undervalue still happens in the exact same. Here it is. Here's the bigger point. She made this. They take those same homes, change it, and make sure that it doesn't like a black person live there, and the evaluation goes up. So that has nothing to do with the crime in the area. The evaluation is going up just by them whitening the inside of the home. And it's something that's still encouraged by a lot of realtors that I know that are in the realtor. They do that because they want to make sure that the home gets appraised higher. They're like, take your pictures down. So that stuff still happens. And so that is
you will run into an incident or two. Nothing's perfect.
So Montoya, the data is
like if you go to a post office, you might find some postal clerks who are extremely nice, and then you might get one postal clerk who's just an a-hole.
Hey, you are void of this mass data. Go ahead, LaTrice, give them the data, and we'll go to
a large study conducted by mortgage giant Freddie Mac and federal data found that homes in majority black census tracts were more likely to be appraised below the agreed contract price compared with majority white neighborhoods of similar attributes. Roughly 12.5% of homes in black areas appraised below contract price versus about 7.4 homes in white area. And I talked about impact because the thing is, if impact is still if we're still being adversely impacted because of race, then that means that there is still an issue with race. The impact is that on a national level, research shows us that homes in majority black neighborhoods are evaluated as worth approximately 21 to 23% less than similar homes in non-black neighborhoods with similar attributes. These effects contribute to a large cumulative loss in black household wealth, race-based impact.
And the similar attributes, the studies account for, again, similar areas, same crime, like those things are accounted for in these studies. I've looked at some of those studies as well. And so it's not an occasional thing just to call it for what it is. But let's go to another cut and get into some politics of some of this stuff.
I hate to keep posting about this guy, but I really just want to know if he made it out of this hearing alive.
One of the things you said was American whites are victims of a cultural genocide. Where to start? So you'd agree with me, wouldn't you, that whites are pretty well represented in the United States Senate?
They are well represented in this body, yes.
And how about in the House of Representatives?
Senator Kaine, I don't have those particular numbers. However,
but you would agree that they're pretty well represented in the House of Representatives.
Senator, I would, again, thank you for the question. I would point out that there were no white Protestants by birth in the 25 cabinet members under Joe Biden.
How about in the ranks of American presidents throughout history, including now pretty well represented whites?
Senator.
And how about in the ranks of vice presidents during American history now whites pretty well represented in that group, right?
Senator, thank you again for the question.
Yeah. I don't think it's hard. How about on the United States Supreme Court? Throughout our history and including now, whites are pretty well represented on the United States Supreme Court, correct?
I think obviously historically, I would of course agree with you. Of course, the vast majority of Americans were white at that time. It's now a much more diverse society.
Let's focus on right now. How about in the ranks of American governors? You think whites are pretty well represented?
I would just have to look at the numbers. I don't know.
Okay, how about this? In the ranks of CEOs of major corporations today, you think whites are pretty well represented?
Senator, thank you for the question. I suspect that they are probably pretty well represented in that. But there are other areas where they're not as well represented.
How about in the ranks of high-income people? And we can define it however you want. Let's just say like top 10% of wealthy Americans. You think whites are pretty well represented?
Senator, thank you for the question. They would certainly be underrepresented with respect to Asian Americans, but they would be overrepresented with respect to other groups.
Some of you may push back on that statistic, and he actually is correct, but it's because Asian Americans are more educated than white Americans. But let's continue.
Yeah. A cultural genocide, that's a stiff claim. And it's an interesting one because it's kind of a white victimhood argument. But if I remember my colleague, Senator Rosen, she was reading comments to you where you had been saying, man, Jews play the victim. Jews like to be the victim. And yet you're making a claim that whites are victimized by a cultural genocide when all the statistics would say, not just in history, but today, that whites are very well represented at every level of every institution.
Senator Tim Kaine, I was not familiar with your game, sir, but I like it. All in all, white Americans are not underrepresented in any field. They are 58 to 60% of the U.S. population, and they have about 65 to 80% of all the key roles across mediums. So this cry and this attempt to make it look like white Americans are underrepresented in fields is completely false.
So let's get into some politics of things. We've been talking about these various areas in which is there systemic stuff, is there not systemic stuff, but we're in the point where, hey, this is a Senate hearing with this guy. And let me give props to the sister. Her name is Melinda Hale, so go follow her. And she's just highlighting, hey, Senator Kaine's basically saying, hey, who's playing victim here? Because that's the times that we're in that I've offered personally. But I'm just wondering, what are y'all thoughts on it? I'll start with you, Chief X. Any thoughts on seeing this guy, I say, fumble over himself, trying to act like there's some type of white cultural genocide? That's how it looked to me.
Well, on that one, I agree that there is no, they're not underrepresented in any field. So I kind of agree with the guy who was grilling him. But I do want to make a point, have a little caveat. For instance, it's just an example. For instance, I said, we need some more black folk in law enforcement, right? I said, you guys are down with white supremacy. I'm just arguing and joking with somebody because you guys don't want or talk against the police, and you influence all these young black kids not to want to become law enforcement. So in other words, what y'all are saying is you only want to be policed. You only want white police in your neighborhoods. You only want to be policed by white folk, right? So this is a mental thing. So for instance, we have songs like F the Police. I understand why that song came out. But a lot of times we are influencing our kids not to want to become police officer or law enforcement. I remember back in the day, Italians and the Irish people pushed for their kids to become law enforcement. Therefore, their kids that's why the mob began to win. Therefore, these Italian and Irish cops was patrolling their own neighborhoods, protecting their own mothers and aunties and things like that. I said, we need to start developing things like that and push for our kids to get into law enforcement, because sometimes I do think we are underrepresented. You know what I mean? So now you have a whole Democratic Party, and the women, 92% voted for Biden and Kamala. And all these people are against ICE and against, arresting illegals who may have committed a crime. So you got this whole sentiment against law enforcement in our community. So that these are some reasons we could be underrepresented in law enforcement. I'm just throwing that out there.
Can I give some data, Montoya?
Now,
Can I share?
Yeah, go ahead, of course.
Sure. Black people make up about 12 to 14% of the population of police officers in this country. We are roughly 13% of the population. So that is in line with where we should be. The caveat comes is that we are underrepresented in leadership in policing. And I wonder why that is.
So we got representation in police.
Do Atlanta have a black?
Hey, we got plenty of police, Chief X.
I know our mayor here is black. We've had another black mayor.
So I see you skip right over.
I know Kamala was the head of the police out here.
Chief X, I see you skip right over the actual cut to jump to not being represented in police, to only to find out we represented in police. Like you just played yourself. Skip right over the cut and saying we're underrepresented in police.
I understand what you're saying, but I was kind of leaning on what she was saying in leadership roles and other higher roles, and how sometimes we may not push for kids, may not go to law school or whatever, And he was, because the guy was asking him about the underrepresentation in politics.
In police, and we found out we in police. Like you're just saying things. Like you're saying we're not like here it is.
I hear you. I'm just giving an example of how sometimes in certain fields we may talk others out of it.
And I'd also like to add the percentage of criminals that have actually been arrested by ICE is relatively small. So we're not mad about the criminals, especially since we got one in the White House.
All right, let's keep this thing moving.
The far right has moved from the fringes directly into the halls of government itself. The New York Times dropped this explosive new report calling out by name members of the Trump administration who expressed opinions that would probably get most people fired, like Darren Beattie, who previously wrote on social media, quote, "Competent white men must be in charge. Unfortunately, our national ideology is predicated on coddling the feelings of women and minorities and demoralizing competent white men." He's now a State Department employee and head of the U.S. Institute for Peace. And Paul Ingracia, who has posted on social media, quote, "Exceptional white men are not only the builders of Western civilization, but are the ones most capable of appreciating the fruits of our heritage." He is now Trump's pick to lead the office of special counsel. And Kingsley Wilson, who said, quote, "The great replacement theory isn't a right-wing conspiracy theory. It's reality." She's now the Pentagon press secretary.
All right, before I let y'all respond, I'm gonna bring again. I just found this sister. Melinda Hale. She's not speaking directly to that cut, but she's speaking about the overall impact of having these type of people in the administration from my perspective. So I'm gonna play this quick 2-minute cut, and then I'll let y'all respond.
Okay, so we need to talk about what the U.S. Department of Labor is doing and why you need to be paying attention. And if you don't see it, then you're just actively choosing not to. So over the last year of this administration, there has been glaring propaganda promoting this particular version of the American dream. And I know that you've all seen these images, the white families from the 50s. They're like carefully curated and traditional looking, but they're pushing a very obvious message. And for years, people of color, but specifically Black people, have been telling you that the government wants to recenter whiteness in this country. So none of this should be new or surprising. But what is how strategic the messaging has become, right? They hate the fact that there has been an increase in diversity and equity in media, in the workplace, in education, in American culture, right? And that has signaled to them that they're going to be a minority. But the thing that's crazy about them fearing that is that it tells you that they know minorities are treated differently in this country. Because if being a minority wasn't dangerous or dehumanizing, why would it scare you so much to become one? And for years, they've just pushed this white replacement theory, trying to convince their base that minorities want this uprising or revenge. But if you've done nothing wrong, why would you fear revenge? If the goal was equality, justice, and humanity, why would you interpret that as retaliation? That fear says more about them than it does about us. And instead of them choosing progress and accountability or attempting to right the wrongs of the past, they want to resegregate. And they want to push propaganda like these pictures. Propaganda that is rooted in nostalgia and a mythologized America that never existed for most people, at least not for people that look like me, but only from the people who benefited from it, right? And to a lot of conservative, evangelical, white Americans, these pictures represent the America that centers them. It erases diversity and it makes whiteness the default again. It's not about families or values. It's about control and racism. So when government agencies are actively rolling out this kind of messaging, please know that it is not random. It is strategic and it is extremely political. Propaganda always shows you the world people in power want to rebuild and the exact people that they expect to disappear in the process.
LaTrice, I'll let you respond to Melinda Hale as I highlight. It's the first time in my life after a Super Bowl, the halftime show seemed more important than the Super Bowl. Because somebody's scared, look like to me. Somebody running scared from my perspective. Go ahead, Queen.
I agree. The things that this administration has done to center whiteness is, and doing it in our face is absolutely ridiculous. The fact that the EEOC is actively calling for white men to come and report discrimination at times when they feel that they've been passed over for a promotion, when research actually shows us that Black people are less likely to get promotion. If they weren't, we'd have more Black people in leadership positions within companies. We'd have more Black CFOs and CEOs. We'd have more Black people in roles other than CHROs. It's very important to understand what's being done. The data's there. The facts speak for themselves. There's data, the impact, the potential impact of the rollbacks, the guardrails that have been removed to protect Black people. And what we're going to see is that the impact, the adverse impact, is going to begin showing itself and has already begun showing itself in some instances. And there is actually data to back that.
So Chief X, when you see the administration making these moves, I'm talking about the moves from a symbolic standpoint, from a propaganda standpoint, I want to highlight that's what Melinda Hale was focused on. And I've always said that whatever action you want, you have to start with the messaging and the narrative. So while I know your position is racism doesn't have an impact today, why would you suggest that the guy that I showed you prior to her that was getting that Senator Kaine was talking to, why would you suggest these actual imagery and these things make America great again? It could appear like it's make America white again. Like that's a fair assessment based on the things I'm seeing. Do you think those things are getting done for no reason? If you believe that racism doesn't have an impact on us as Black people today, like are those things getting done for no reason? That's my question to you.
I guess we would have to talk about what these things are. But let me just make
the things that she highlighted in the video, like she was highlighting the propaganda and the imagery of taking America back to this. And,
yeah, she was talking about the past. She was talking about segregation, resegregation.
No. She was highlighting what's being propagandized right now, currently.
She was giving her political view on the Trump administration. It sounded like.
No, I'm talking about the actual imagery that they're putting up. Like, for example, I'll give you an example that she didn't talk about. Like just a month ago, they just put on the president's site. The imagery they put on, they played a song that is, and I wish I could give you the specifics of it now, but they played a song that specifically has his birth in the during the rebellion, during the Civil War, and so they're playing that song, and it's actually on the president's site, and they're like, why would this song be played? And it's in regards to ICE protecting us against immigration. So these things are being done intentionally currently, not in the past. What she pointed out was the imagery that's being shown right now. Currently, you got this white guy saying Biden didn't have any Protestant white people in his stuff, and we're being underrepresented. Like, where this sentiment, you think this sentiment is coming from no place? Like, why is this sentiment being pushed currently, propagandized, not in the past, currently? Why is this propaganda being done to show America yesteryear looking white? Why is that being done, in your opinion? Because that is being done.
And those pictures were present day pictures. Those were not old pictures. Those were current pictures.
Current day pictures. I want to make that clear if you misunderstood that.
Well, let me be honest. I was writing down some notes as they were speaking, so I may not have.
Okay, fair enough.
And I may not be familiar. I am not familiar with the incident you're speaking about either. But I do want to make this one point, because we kind of had two arguments for a minute, right? We're talking about underrepresentation and this racism and being excluded and all this old stuff. But then we had an argument that we represented properly in law enforcement. So
the one incident of being represented, and if I take you to if I show you 100 industries and 95 of them were underrepresented and 5 of them were represented, like, you're trying to make a linear argument versus the context.
No, as soon as I was just making an example about how we influence our children for certain employment jobs now, right? Her argument was we are represented according to we're 13% of the population and 13% of the law enforcement is black folk. So this was an argument for us being equal on the same scale today.
So let me thank you first.
I can't speak to we can move on from the other one because I didn't really pay attention to what the lady was saying, so I can't really speak to it.
Okay, but you know what? You missed an important part of what I said. I said that we were not represented in leadership. We are always underrepresented. We are always overrepresented in the labor-intensive component of work and always underrepresented in the leadership component. Not because we're not overly qualified, not because we don't make the attempt to get into those roles, but who are the gatekeepers to those roles? Is it us or is it them? And by us, I mean black, and by them, I mean white. Just in case.
But we are in leadership in law enforcement.
We are underrepresented. I use my words intentionally. We are underrepresented in leadership, and there is data to back that up. Now, your perspective, your thoughts, your opinions might be different, but the data says we are underrepresented. So thank you for bringing that up.
According to the data, you said we're not. That's all.
That's not what she said. She said that's not what she said.
No. Okay, let me clarify. She said we're underrepresented in leadership. I don't know if she was talking about in leadership in law enforcement because
you specifically said that.
I disagree that we're underrepresented in leadership in law enforcement.
You can disagree, but the data says otherwise. The research says otherwise.
Where's your information?
All I know is in Atlanta. I asked you about Atlanta.
I don't care about Atlanta.
I was telling you about LA, where I was at. The data in LA says we're not underrepresented.
Oh my God, this dude is useless.
I'm not.
Listen.
Listen.
Watch this. Here it is. Watch this, Chief X. You just played yourself, and I'm gonna go to another cut, but you just played yourself. You thought the reason we even got into the law enforcement officer because you skipped over the cut, which is the second time you've done that. You're just making points that are not related to the cut, just so that you know. So you skip past the cut to talk about how our community doesn't send enough people into law enforcement because we don't want to be police, only for her to look up the data and find out that we were represented in law enforcement. So you were actually making the argument saying we probably don't have enough people policing us. That was your actual argument. So now to turn around and say, oh, we're represented in leadership, you were making an argument saying we didn't have enough people.
No, that wasn't.
And you played yourself She looked it
No,
up
I
and
was
saw that we were represented
Montoya,
in law enforcement.
I
But
was
you're
making
saying
an
we were not
no, I
because
was
we
just
choose not to. That
I
was
was
your
making
argument.
I was making an argument, an example of how sometimes we badly influence our kids for certain jobs. I just use hold on. I just used that one. I wasn't saying that this is the numbers for law enforcement. I was just saying how I was using an example of how we badly influence our kids sometimes.
Yeah, you just jumped into the example and played yourself. That's just really what happened just now. Yeah, we were we were very well represented in the area you say we badly influence people not to go into. We're in file and rank, which hasn't been a problem for at least 70 years. We've been file and rank for years. The issue is, can we elevate and get to the actual jobs that will bring wealth? We're in file and rank. We've been in file and rank since the 70s. Since that's not
So like right now, LaTrice, you can start any company you want to. No one's gonna stop you. If you wanted to start a toilet tissue making company, no one's gonna stop you. No one's gonna stop me for be starting a real estate company. It happens all the time. No one's stopping me, my son, or anybody on this panel from doing anything, starting any kind of business.
We're not even disagreeing, but we're not
Right, so-
disagreeing with that because you're
so
not
in-
listening to what we're talking
Let me
about.
finish my
We're not
sentence.
disagreeing with that.
No,
We're not
let me-
disagreeing with that.
I know, just let me just finish my sentence. What I'm saying is, I right now can go buy a home in any city I want to. No one's gonna stop me. If they try, I can sue them. We can do anything we want. I'm not a victim. My son's not a victim. I've never been oppressed. I'm not saying it doesn't go down, but I don't want to sit here and act like we're just some victims and the world is just totally against us and we can't do nothing. I don't want to get that sentiment across. I want to let people know I'm a free man. I got a passport. I can go to any country I want. I can leave anytime I want to, and nobody's stopping me. We are powerful people, and we're not a victim in 2026.
But you
Now,
skipped over the video of the white people being victims. You're like, I didn't pay no attention.
I did mention about the wealth gap and how it got there because times, back in the day. But we free people, and we're not victims today. So I'm not gonna play no victim.
Montoya, I opened my statement at the very beginning of this call by saying we are not victims. Because someone made a comment about playing the race card in the comments. We are not victims. We are actually very resilient people because in spite of the systemic issues that still impact us, we find a way when there is no way. So we are anything but victims. And speaking out against the oppression, against the systemic issues doesn't mean that we are being victims. It means that we're calling out the BS that this country engages in. Further, to your point about starting a business, one of the reasons so many Black businesses struggle to make it is because, according to data, only about 0.48% of all US VC investment goes to Black businesses. And I even worked for a prominent VC who made a statement on Twitter that said the reason he does not invest in Black companies is because most of the founders are born to single parent households, and that means they're cognitively inferior. And that's the mindset of so many white Americans in this country. So when we call it out, we're calling out BS.
And the policies literally have decreased the number of these. The number has decreased. That number you're talking about, LaTrice, was up to 2% prior to the current policies that we've had. So we've actually lost even those that are getting VC money. This is a real number that's went down to 0.4%. It was at 2% 3 years ago. So we've actually lost. It doesn't mean that individually I can't go do something. Nobody's having that conversation, but we have to be respectful of the impact to the whole when we see policies that actually are guardrails and we actually get rid of them and actually hurt the actual opportunities that exist. All right, let me play this cut. This is in reference to what's happening now with the SAVE Act. I thought this was interesting. I actually want to point out where these conversations get stuck in narratives versus what's actually being said. This is something y'all probably seen Abby Phillips and
I'm gonna pay
Scott
attention this
Gibbons.
time.
What voting rights is he taking away from Black voters? Oh, if we look at
the SAVE Act?
The SAVE Act, that's exactly what we're talking about. That is actually going to continue to disenfranchise overwhelmingly a lot of people of color. There are so many civil rights organizations that have run the data. If we look at the way that it is going to disenfranchise black voters, it's the same reason why Chuck Schumer called it Jim Crow 2.0.
So,
this is the same president. If we want to continue...
You haven't said how yet.
I am talking about it. It's the way that you're putting new poll taxes on this when you're making people have... That's what we can call them now. It's kind of an idiom, right? If you want to say that people have to prove that they are citizens, that they have to prove with a voter ID, the reality is you're layering what is a constitutional right for the American people and making it harder for people to vote in this country, and it's going to disenfranchise black voters.
Concern you that you're making all these claims? You've yet to lay out how it's hurting anyone, but 76% of black voters think we should show an ID to vote. 80% of Hispanic voters, 83% of the American people. Are you saying that black voters
the
are
SAVE
too
Act
dumb to know what's good for them? I
the
mean,
SAVE
it sounds
isn't
pretty,
just about
it sounds pretty condescending to me.
The SAVE Act is not
three-quarters of black voters
who
want voter ID.
But to be clear, the SAVE Act is not just about ideas. The SAVE Act is about proof of citizenship.
So what?
So it doesn't. I actually.
It also makes it very hard for married women who've changed
I was just going to say we talked about this before. It's not. It actually. There's an argument to be made that red state voters, women, poor white voters could be just as.
I know you think they're dumb too, don't you? I mean, that's the thing. I hear these arguments. I've heard Democrats all week long.
No, please don't. No, you listen.
There's the deflection from talking about long-term racism.
I'm actually
right there.
You should be thinking about your constituents or your.
Yeah, I think they're smart enough to figure out how to register to vote. Abby.
Hold on. Most Americans don't have a passport. Many Americans don't have access to their birth certificate. Many women, a majority of women who change their names for marriage have to provide additional proof that they've changed their legal names in order to register to vote.
I have heard Democrats
Scott, why don't you actually respond to the substance of what I'm saying?
I am, and
as
the substance
opposed
is
to
this.
making this about something that it's not.
You're saying,
it's not just about voter ID.
married
It's
women,
also about
black
who has
voters,
access
and rural people are too stupid to figure out how to register to vote.
No, that's not.
That is not what
Democrats have been making this argument all the time.
That's
crazy. That's not what she said.
Are you saying they can't figure out how to vote?
Let me offer the proof.
Are you saying they can't figure out how to vote?
This is the exact same argument.
All right, I want to break down what I witnessed in that conversation, and I think it is what we see when it comes to politics all the time. Political narratives become the argument versus what actually is happening. And so in that dialogue, obviously, I think the Republicans just passed the SAVE Act, from what I understand, just looking at the recent, just as of last night, if I remember correctly, just seeing that. So that video may have happened prior to it passing. And so anyway, so in that conversation, you have Scott Jennings, who keeps relating to, are you saying black people or women are stupid? Or that he's like, I've seen Democrats make the argument all week long that people are not capable. And he's saying, despite the polls that show most black people, most Hispanic people, and most of Americans are for the SAVE Act and showing the ID. Like he brings those real numbers. And so when Abby points out the actual, what people actually have and the requirements that they might do they have passports? Do they have birth certificates accessible? And she just highlights that these constituents are cross-party lines. She was like, you have plenty of people in your own party that having access to these things are not as easily accessible. And she says, the point is, this is not about an ID. This is about proof of citizenship. And so as she's making the dialogue, he starts going to the political narrative of, are you saying these people are too stupid? She's saying nothing of the sort. She's just talking about the accessibility of a birth certificate and a passport for a lot of people, a lot of Americans. I think passports, is it even 30% of people that have passports in the country or something? Some numbers pretty low on the passport part. But and I do a political show, and that's something I saw even Brother Shelley Winters, who's a big MAGA proponent. He was like, let's be realistic about who has their birth certificate laying around. Like he's just saying, just as a point of fact, but the dialogue shot to the narrative. So I just wanted to critique that even these dialogues about race are very similar. We will move away from the actual facts and then push towards a narrative. I think some of that's happened today on this show, but that's why, again, it's obviously race related because of the Immigration and the Voter Savers ID Act. But the bigger picture is, why is it being done, and why is the narrative leaned on versus the actual conversation about, is this going to be something easy for Americans to do? And so it's devoid of the voter suppression that it's really about. That if it wasn't about that, he would have answered based on the substance of what she was saying. But because there's a narrative, then people just lean into the narrative instead of having an actual conversation. When they don't want to have an actual conversation, I know there's something underneath it all. Anybody can jump in.
Real quick. So the SAVE Act, just help me out here.
Okay.
Is about voter ID basically, and requiring.
Yes, basically they're adding, in addition to showing the ID, you have to bring a birth certificate and or a passport to show your residency in addition to the ID now. That's what I think.
Your last name has to match, and so for women who your last name has to match your birth certificate, and so for women who are married and take their husband's last name, they now have to not only bring show their birth certificate, but also a passport
to vote.
To vote, yes. Well, it has not passed the Senate, although Susan Collins has flipped to vote for it, but it did pass the House. Unless I'm looking now.
Pass the House. Yeah, pass the House. I think just last night or night before last.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, but that's so. But go ahead, brother. Jump in.
So are you saying that just me, as a Los Angeles citizen, and having my driver's license won't be good enough to vote?
No.
No, it will not be good enough to vote anymore.
If this SAVE Act passed.
If it passes it. Yeah.
Okay.
But LaTrice, but you see what I was just talking about, breaking down how they were leaning into the narrative versus her just saying, hey, this is going to affect people on both sides, is what Abby Phillips was saying. I'm not trying to negate or have the argument about the SAVE Act. I was just talking about can we witness how conversations happen, even when we're talking about race, we lean into political narratives that have nothing to do with the actual facts.
Absolutely. And so, go ahead on.
My understanding is before this SAVE Act talk, we've had the similar argument about voter ID 4 years ago.
There was no option to have to bring the passport or the birth certificate in the past.
The driver's license was sufficient.
Yeah, the driver's license has always been sufficient.
Okay, but I think the Democrats was arguing against IDs then too.
Sir, we're talking about the SAVE.
I'm just trying to get an understanding.
Montoya, can I just explain something?
Okay, go ahead.
The problem that in that clip that we saw is the problem with partisanship.
Right. That's what I'm talking about.
On either side of the aisle, and I'm an independent, on either side of the aisle, when you don't want to discuss the real data, the facts, you do narrative drift.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. That's
what they did in that instance. And that happens on both sides of the aisle, which is why I'm an independent. And it does the U.S. citizenry harm because many of us don't like to read. We look at this, we listen to news clips, snippets, we read the headlines, but rarely do we dig into the facts. And so there's so much non-data that the fluffy stuff, the distractions that they engage in to distract from the real damage that something like the SAVE Act would do. It would create additional steps that women would have to go through to vote, and even other folks, because if you got to show your birth certificate, the older you get, the less likely you are to keep up with that thing. And so it is harmful. And to me, they should be doing everything that they can to make certain that we are able to get more citizens to the polls to speak and vote versus less.
And the question is why, but it's kind of hard to connect the dots because, in my opinion, I'm about to connect the dot between the three of us because you didn't pay attention to the clip that connects the dots. That connects the dots to me is this: Why are these efforts being made to propagandize race towards whiteness and a suppression of the vote based on immigrants? Why is that being done? But I get that if you didn't pay attention to the previous cut, this doesn't connect now for you, Chief X, because you're missing the point of that video. Is these things are being done, and for somebody who says, hey, these things are not a problem now, then why is there an effort to maintain you already being overrepresented in all of these positions? You're overrepresented. Why is there such a fight if everything's based on merit? That doesn't make sense.
And so, but that goes to my opening question. The question is whether race still predicts outcomes. And if it does, that's a signal that racism still exists. If they're going directly to the race narrative, that means that they're in a sense, they're saying the part that they want to keep quiet. If one's race is still, if the outcome is still predicated by one's race, then race is still an issue. Racism is still alive and present.
Like Abby said, this is not about voting. This is about proving your proof of citizenship, which we know what that's related to now. Here's one last cut, and then I'm going to share something from my book and get y'all out of here. And so this cut is something in reference to an actual result over the last few years based on current policies. Because here's something that I talked about, LaTrice. I don't know if you saw the last Politically Conscious show, but I am real adamant, for example, about I no longer, and I hate that we waste time trying to say President Trump is racist or Joe Biden is racist. I hate the conversations about how racist someone is. I'm more concerned about the actual policies, and I would love to see us as a constituent, us as voters, to be concerned about policies over how racist someone is. And so we've had this policy that everybody knows about. I wanted to share this as some results of what happens when you're not considerate of policy, but you get caught up in arguing over narratives, for example, about DEI. I've watched our community argue over the political narratives and miss what actually happens legally. If you know what happens legally, you won't get caught up in arguing over the political narratives that both sides push, how they push the racial part, and what about the actual law and what DEI can and cannot do legally. So here's a clip that speaks to what has happened now that DEI has been removed. And a lot of people were okay with it because they didn't know what was going to happen. You got to pay attention to know what's going to happen. So here's an example. I want to get both your thoughts, and then I'll read a piece of my book and get you guys out of here.
As MIT's incoming first-year class began orientation this week in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the elite university's president speaking out about the makeup of the class of 2028.
What it does not bring as a consequence of last year's Supreme Court decision is the same degree of broad racial and ethnic diversity.
The roughly 1,100 members of the class, the first shaped in part by the Supreme Court's decision striking down affirmative action in school admissions.
I'm very surprised and I'm honestly shocked that it would have dropped so much.
Black and African Americans making up just 5% of students compared to 13% in the previous 4 years. Hispanic students, 11%, down from 15%. But Asian American students up 47% from 41%. And white students holding steady at 37% from 38% previously. Students we spoke to here concerned.
I do think, like, when I look out at my class, you know, you see a lot of people who look like me and much fewer people who look different from me.
Diversity is actually one of the biggest reasons that I came to MIT. I definitely think it's a sending shift.
MIT professor Danielle Wood believes cutting race from the equation was a mistake. What do you think that does to the campus at large?
I think it harms the campus. There is a lot of research that shows that it's important for students of all backgrounds to feel both welcomed and as though they belong. Plus, more diverse environments produce more innovation.
Wood is both the chair of the African American Studies program at MIT and a former student.
I really would say that I'm in mourning, in part because I know there's people like me who might have had a chance to study at MIT and they won't have that opportunity.
at least 3 other schools releasing their data, showing dips in Black enrollment ranging from small to 8%.
How do we get the desired results of diversity without compromising merit?
Deborah Alexander's son, Augie, is starting the college application process. She says she values diversity, but that the playing field needs to be leveled well before college.
Admission to college should be based on, again, that best fit. And the best fit for an academic setting should be the academic merit of the child.
Here at MIT, the university is vowing to find ways to increase diversity without violating the Supreme Court ruling. That means increasing outreach to minority communities and promoting its financial aid programs. 9 states had previously banned affirmative action at its public universities. Most saw a drop in minority students immediately after. Are you hopeful for the future?
I have to stay hopeful because that's what keeps us focused on being creative and innovating.
A long road ahead in the quest for diversity on campus. Rahema Ellis, NBC News, Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news.
So this is an area that I'm very near and dear to, having worked in college admissions myself. And again, watch the political narratives bastardize what actually happens. And so the word that everybody loved to throw around in the political narrative was merit-based. And it was basically bamboozled to the public on how actually selection and how it happens. And legally, due to certain court cases, specifically in the 70s and to the 80s, there was a history where, for example, quotas got put in place and eventually they were shot down. At that point, legally, it was impossible to enter someone that was unqualified into a workplace or a college place. But again, I'll speak specifically to college because that's something that I work specifically in. And so basically what has happened every time that, like, for example, I studied California when they first put Prop 209. They were one of the first ones to do it. Texas graduate schools followed next. Then Michigan followed next. I didn't keep up when the other 6 did it or whatever. But I studied the 3 that specifically did it first years ago. And so basically, the reality is this. So when you get caught up in the political narrative, you actually think people are getting in that are less qualified. You think Black people are getting in that are less qualified. The realities of having done admissions for a highly selective school, the reality is, I'll just give you some basic numbers to keep it easy here. But if a school is going to take 1,000 freshmen or 2,000 freshmen, the large schools take way more. But for a small school like ours, it's going to take a little over 1,000 or whatever. You're going to have 30,000 applications. You're going to, about 5,000 of them are going to qualify. So you're going to have way over the number that you're actually going to select that actually qualify your school based on what you put out for your select. Again, a more selective school has a smaller number. The bigger schools have a bigger number. But at the end of the day, they have to first qualify. That's a no-brainer. Legally, that's how it has to be. And then what happens is schools, just like the Air Force Academy that I went to, you then come up with a composite score, and your composite score is heavily factored on SAT and academics, and then the other things. We were a military school, so leadership was high for one of our composites. We have a lot of pilots come out of our school. So believe it or not, your eyesight is a bigger composite to come to our school than maybe another school, because they want to make sure they have enough qualified pilots by the time you graduate in 4 years. So they want to bring in a lot of people with 20/20 vision. Most schools would never have to consider that, but the Air Force Academy absolutely considers that. I'm just giving you that every school is different on what goes beyond the ACT, the SAT, and the grades. Your composite score is factored in to get the diversity that you like. With diversity in place, I work specifically in the minority enrollment office. That's funded because diversity is in place. Because what requires, if we're going to have a diverse population, you know what I have to do? I have to put money in funding to produce and promote and advocate. And I literally traveled to schools that had never heard of my school. The funding was there because we still have to get enough qualified people to apply so that the academy could have a diverse freshman class. So the money goes towards promotion and getting it out and funding advertising to people who I barely knew anything about the Air Force Academy. My uncle was a liaison officer. It's the only reason I ever heard of it. But I actually recruited in the South and spent a full year letting people know that still hadn't even heard of it. And that only because it's funded. But now, with the policies we have now, that stuff will not be funded. So the exposure becomes the issue. Qualification is never the issue, and that's been the case legally since '88.
I agree. This topic is near and dear to my heart too because of my profession. And I think what so many people miss while with that affirmative action decision, they did nothing to address legacy admissions, which is a major hindrance to increasing diversity. Because legacy, who's been there before, that has a lot to do with our past. Additionally, we don't think about, let's take it to the workplace, which is my area of specialty. We talk about merit there a lot. The last 3, maybe 4 companies that I worked for that had internship programs, most of those internship programs were filled with the executives' children. And I stated the data, there's not a lot of Black folks in leadership. So who do you think those internship programs were filled with? Those interns got experience that allowed them to then enter into a role based on merit. But at the very beginning of their career, because of their proximity to power, i.e. their parents, they jump to the head of the line. That's a problem when we talk about.
And here's the thing that I want to clarify. It's not that those students won't stop jumping to the head of the line, but what happens is when you have legal guidelines in the place of your workplace, you actually have to say, make room for very qualified women, very qualified Black people. Like, you have to do diverse, because what happens is these companies don't want to lose their money they get from government contract. Companies scale when they do business with the government. If you're a private company that's not going to do government contracting, this shit don't even apply to you. Like, let's just make sure we're being real clear here. But for all the companies that we know are huge and got large employees, they just want to make sure they keep their government contract. So while they're still going to put their kid to the front of the line, they also have to make sure that it's diverse, because the government contract at the federal level requires it. The federal level requires it. So then there is no guardrail for even successful, qualified Black people to fill those space, because nobody's going to look at them right now. That's the reality under the current situation. Chief X,
and if those companies don't contract with the government, then there are no guardrails in place.
Yeah, absolutely. I said that. I mean, I want to make that clear. Yeah, if you're a private company and don't do government contracting, and I actually understand that. I respect that, because it's usually a smaller business.
I understand it. It doesn't make it right, because if we're talking merit, your child didn't necessarily meet that requirement. But if the CEO of, say, a company says, "I want my son to be in the internship program," and he's a C student, who's gonna tell the CEO no?
You don't have to, and that's never going to happen in a private company, no matter what. I get that. But go ahead.
But what I'm saying is, when we have the conversation around merit, those folks got to jump to the head of the line, and so once they jump to the head of the line through that internship program, they got that experience. So now we want to talk about merit, getting there because you earned it. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. But I don't even like going to the CEO kid. I want to say this and then let Chief Ed jump in this, and we'll get out of here. But I don't even like jump to the CEO kid, because I'm talking about, obviously we're talking about the workplace. But when I go back to college admissions, so what happens is, without the effort to promote or go find diverse students, what happens is, as a recruiter, my job is for example, when I would go to the South, because I was responsible for the Southern region, I could have easily went to, literally, we line up the schools, we look at what the numbers are, and we look at all this stuff. It's easy for me to go recruit at the schools that already are academically inclined. You still do some of that, but I could be lazy. I'm just talking about just as a recruiter, I could be lazy and just go where people already know about it. I'll get enough students just from there. It won't bring no diversity to the academy, but I could easily just go where the students already are. That's what people miss on what the funding for diversity is on the college level. There is no allowing somebody in that's not merit-based. Chief X, I know we kind of been listening, but I just wanted to throw this out because I know you have been someone who's kind of chastised DEI, but I've always said I feel like people like yourself don't understand legally what it does. The narratives have always been BS.
So I was watching the clip by MSNBC just now. I'm sorry, NBC. You know, MSNBC is the liberal news channel. But anyway, I was just joking. It's surprising. I was wondering why they use MIT in the example, that exclusive school.
They end up doing. They show about 4 or 5. I mean, I guess
Right.
it was about 4 or 5 they end up showing.
And this DEI and affirmative action has only kind of been recently cut within the last 9 months ago.
3 years. 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Yeah, 3 years. The Harvard case that the Asians brought 3 years ago. So we're 3 years removed, and we've seen.
So you're saying Biden removed DEI?
Yeah, I'm just saying.
The Supreme Court removed
the Supreme Court used
affirmative action within the schools.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 years ago. So we got 3 results, and we also got 3 years of results of government contracting decreasing.
Okay.
And again, that makes go ahead.
Well, so I can't speak to to it too much. It's not my wheelhouse, but I hope things improve. If there's some stuff going on, I hope things improve. I'm just glad my son, his friends, and the kids I know were able to get into a college and get an education and get a career. I'm just glad that they were okay. So I hope things improve is all I can say.
Yes, it's a bad hope when we don't pay attention to the policies that help us and we put out misinformation on the policies instead of the actual information and being aware of what you're actually voting for. So that's my challenge. All right, let me read this piece and get y'all out of here. So, shameless plug, re-education of the Negro. It's called Cultural Capitalism. Let me share this with y'all and get y'all out of here. So basically, these are short commentaries with some short questions. So I got a couple of questions. I'll let my guests answer the questions and we'll close this out. So Black Socrates Speaks, Cultural Capitalism. The subtitle is Uncovering White Privilege. The reality of racism lies somewhere between the minority's warranted skepticism and the majority's oblivious disregard. For example, the General Social Survey conducted yearly by the National Opinion Research Center found that 28% of Americans still believe they should not have to sell their homes to Black people. If you tell Black people this number, they assume it's much higher, whereas most whites would suggest it's much lower. The truth is, regardless of what either group thinks, it's 28%. Also, believe it or not, these people are not just in the South, but all over America, according to the General Social Survey. The good thing is that number of Americans who feel this way is lowering each year, but at the same time, 28% equates to 88.5 million Americans, doubling the 41.7 million African Americans currently in this country. This 28% blend into a larger society of non-racist individuals. However, the discrimination doesn't go unnoticed by those who they pass over for a deserved promotion, red line to live in a certain neighborhood, or harass without probable cause as officers of the law. Since most white Americans are not deep-seated racists, most have no idea how this racist 88.5 million treats those who are different from them. They may hear a news report about a case of racism. However, in their mind, the issue is probably attributed to other factors and more than likely being sensationalized just as racism is. The majority would like to assume this is the case most of the time, or if the majority acknowledges racism at all, it's typically seen as a one-time incident versus the white privilege afforded to them by never experiencing these actions. The term white privilege itself is mistakenly understood by many non-racist whites as an accusation of having it easy. For the record, white privilege is not accusatory at all, nor does it contend anything gained was not earned. Instead, it speaks to the reality that privilege provides as far as access to the American dream, fairness in the justice system, and the assurance that the hard work the majority so often speaks of will be rewarded. For example, a white person in America would never think to change their name while leaving everything else the same on their online resume/application to receive more callbacks and job offers. For most people, 3 out of the last 5 jobs were probably obtained through a mutual relationship. Unfortunately for minorities, reciprocal relationships with the majority are typically limited and therefore access to those same opportunities is also limited. And of course, we cannot forget about the managers and business owners hiding in that 28% that still intentionally deny access to those opportunities. No one is blaming the majority for taking advantage of this implicit advantage. However, it is a privilege nonetheless, and to carry on as if it's non-existent shades the argument of fairness clearly towards the haves. In the meantime, the have-nots steadily work hard and face the same barriers as the majority, plus discrimination that has nothing to do with their work ethic. Just my 3 cents. All I ask is that you think. I have a quick sidebar. Sidebar says, on the action of racism, please do not confuse racism as bigoted Black people who may carry disdain in their heart for white people and commit individual acts against whites due to their bigotry, yet rarely but never consistently in a position of power to act on actual racism in America. And so my discussion question, I'll ask both of you this: is white privilege about having it easy or having access? I'll hit you, Chief X. What do you think about that? What's your answer to that question after hearing that piece?
I think there's white privilege and Black privilege. I think people just have their biases. I think I should apologize because I made sure that the seller of the home and me as an agent chose these Black folk over anybody else. Hey, we're just not perfect human beings and we just have biases. But I think there's white and Black privilege. I think there's Black judges and white judges, and
I hear your thoughts. You're not answering the question, but you're not answering the question. So
I'm glad. I'm glad some family and friends of mine succeeded in face of.
Now I hear that. Yeah, you've been making that clear all.
You know what I mean? So
I'm just saying you're not. Can I move it to LaTrice because you didn't answer the question?
You didn't answer the question.
What's the direct?
I'm moving on because you're not answering the question.
What's the direct question?
LaTrice, I'll ask you: is white privilege about having it easy or having access?
It's about having access. When I actually talk to white people about white privilege,
I'll say both.
We're not talking to you. You've already not answered.
I'm just saying.
We've already not answered. So
go ahead, LaTrice. Go ahead.
When I talk about this, because I realize that words matter and words trigger people, so I don't talk about it in the context of white privilege. What I talk about it because white privilege is essentially unearned advantage, because so it's not about making it easy. It's about advantage that you didn't earn just by virtue of being born in white skin. But I talk about it in the perspective of unearned disadvantage, and so everybody in the room's like, "What's that? What do you mean?" Well, I knew when I explained what unearned disadvantage is, then they're like, well, that's not right, because I didn't trigger them with the words that I use. So it's just about finding ways to get them to engage in the conversation without triggering them. But I think I did answer your question, did I?
No, you did. I'll say that it's definitely about having access. I don't think it's about having easy at all. I don't diminish no person's accomplishment, no matter their race, because everybody has to put in some effort to get what they got. But I think people misnomer white privilege, and that's why they say I worked hard, but nobody's ever saying that you didn't work hard. Like that's always been misunderstood in my opinion. All right, what's the difference between racism and bigotry? I'll start with you, LaTrice, on that one.
Racism has to do with power structures. In order to truly be racist, it's about, because I look at the systems and the impact, so it's about who holds the power. Bigotry is that individual dislike or disdain for someone because of certain attributes that they hold.
All right, Chief X, you want to take a stab at that? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I just let me just be honest. I just Googled the definition of bigotry. It says obstinate or unreasonable attachment to a belief, opinion, or faction, in particular prejudice against a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular group. So a lot of times we do, and I always have gotten these terms racism and bigotry confused and mixed up, but I just wanted to read that definition.
No, fair enough. And last question.
Thank you for not answering that question too.
Well,
thank you for being such an emotional wreck today.
Oh, okay. You're more than welcome. I do this when people don't engage in dialogue intentionally.
We've been engaging in dialogue.
Okay.
Let me jump in. Last question.
What do you have to say, Montoya? Because
You have been an emotional
not
wreck.
going to answer the question. He's not going to answer the question.
All day long.
Hey, let me finish this, y'all, and close this out. The article my article that I wrote says this article suggests that slightly less than 30% of Americans are hardcore racists. What percentage of that other 70% cares about improving race relations, and what percentage are indifferent? What's your opinion of that one, Chief X?
So say it again.
No problem. So in the article, I highlighted the article suggests that slightly less than 30% of Americans are hardcore racists. What percentage of that other 70% cares about improving race relations, and what percentage is indifferent? In your thoughts, just your thoughts on that.
I don't think anybody cares. I think people only care about their immediate family, their kids, themselves, their employment, and their plight in life. People in general just want to get along and have peace, live in nice neighborhoods and get along and entertain themselves and make sure their children is successful. Nobody really cares.
All right, so I think his answer is that the other 70% is indifferent. What percentage of that 70% do you think is indifferent, and what that percentage you think cares? And this is from your personal assessment. This is obviously an anecdotal thought.
I'm going to say it's probably going to be about a 40-30 mix, with about 40 people being indifferent and 30% saying that they're concerned. Because the thing is, you just never know. I think those who are concerned, they recognize that there's a time. My child may be white, but he may marry a black woman and have a black child. And so what type of life would that white person be? And many people just care about what the world looks like and the type of world that we're leaving behind for our children, while others don't.
And I want to say this last thing too. In my opinion, white supremacy or some races has no power over my life or my achievements or what I want to do, or my son's life, his achievements and what he want to do. It has no power over him or me.
But the systems in power do. Thank you, Montoya.
I ask people all the time. They say systematic racism. I ask them what system is racist, and
that's not surprising coming from you.
The system has no effect over my success in life. If I want to be successful, I gotta make it happen myself. That's just. I'm just.
But here, let me step in, LaTrice. Like you say that as though I would disagree with you, Chief X.
No. I'm talking to the audience, really.
Okay, but here it is. See, what I'm saying is your response is exactly why, to LaTrice's point at the very beginning of this show, why, regardless of, like, take it out of party, right? Take it away from party, but it's the exact reason why African Americans have been successful despite what party they're with. We've had African Americans who are successful because they believe as you believe about individually what can be accomplished. Like, that's not what the dialogue about. Like, nothing about this dialogue has been what is the individual impact on you or I. However, again, I think you conveniently skipped over that there is a group who's playing victim that you kind of conceded at the beginning, but then you stopped listening the rest of the way, that there's a group currently playing victim, actually getting people in the White House. We highlighted the different positions that they have, and currently on the president's website playing to a white America, and you have no answer for why that's being done. I'll say this to you. It ain't being done for no reason. That propaganda is not happening for no reason. Now, here it is. I'm not telling you that whatever's behind what they're doing is going to stop you or your son. That's not what I'm telling you. But to say that there is no system when we see a converted effort, and as that young sister said, let me give her credit because this ain't my thought. Her name is Melinda Hale, if I'm saying it correctly, and she said you're willfully choosing to be ignorant to the propaganda that is being pushed, and also policies that back that. You're willfully being ignorant to not notice those things. You conveniently didn't pay attention to them today on this show as well. I'm just calling you out for that.
Who'd you vote for?
That conversation has to be had.
Who'd
you couldn't have it because you didn't watch that.
Montoya, who'd you vote for?
This conversation is not about Republican.
Let me answer.
I'm talking to him.
Let me answer.
I'm talking to you.
Okay, I'm talking to him. Let him answer the question. Stop
Whatever.
interrupting.
You wanted her name? You said her name?
No.
You
I
know
asked.
who you voted for.
Excuse me. I was just asking who did you
I
vote
don't
for?
care.
I was just curious.
You asked me what? What I can't hear.
I was curious. Who did you vote for? Did you vote for Biden, Kamala ticket? I'm just curious.
You asking?
I'm asking you.
Know who you voted for in the last presidential election.
I don't understand how that relates to what we're talking
No, it doesn't.
about.
I was just curious. It's just for self. It has nothing to do with anything. I'm just curious.
I don't
okay.
Pick it out.
Because racists sit on both sides of the line.
Well, we know who LaTrice voted
Racists sit on both. I'm talking.
Yeah, you got to respect her now.
Racists sit on both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely.
Racists. It's the
that wasn't my point.
Nobody cares. I'm talking. Nobody cares about the people. I don't care how many racists dislike me. I don't care how many, to your point, Chief X, I don't care how many racist people try to stop me from achieving my goals. It's not those people that matter. It's the systems that make our path to success much harder. And that's what I fight against. I don't tell my children and grandchildren that they can't succeed. I tell them that they can. And then I go to do the work behind the scenes to make certain that the path is clearer for them than it was for me.
Hey, good stuff, man. Great dialogue today. Appreciate y'all for taking this much time to be on with me. Appreciate y'all. So, y'all have anything publicly y'all want to share with the public? Just as I want to make sure.
Falling Black in Love Again will be released at the end of July. So I'll be talking more about my book the closer I get to the release date.
All right, super cool. Chief actually sells some products. I think you still sell some. I think publicly. If you don't, if not.
Yeah, I do. I still sell Moringa, bodyandherbs.com. And I just want to say, everybody be confident, be proud, don't be a racist, erase the hate, and you can do anything you want to do.
Absolutely. I'm going to close it out with anybody in Atlanta. We do have the Mental Dialogue Live experience every third Friday. We're calling this Black Business and Financial Strategy Month. So I'm going to close out with this promo. And we'll see y'all when we pop up again. Also follow us, and it'll say this at the end. Follow us on the YouTube page, youtube.com/mental dialogue. And that's where you'll hear our politically conscious show where we do specifically politics from the left and the right. All right, y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in, and share this show with anybody that you think can benefit from it. We're going beyond Black History Month and getting to the money at the Mental Dialogue Live experience, as we've dubbed February as Black Business and Financial Strategy Month. Legacy isn't luck, it's strategy, and business grows through connection. Learn wealth strategies from financial coach Ashonda Davis and wealth educator Denise Muldrew. Business owners come out and learn how to get connected and more exposure with insight from Melvin Coleman, president of the Atlanta Black Chamber, and finally discover why every family with young children should have Monopoly game nights. Friday, February 20th, 7 p.m. at Urban Grind. Get all details at mentaldialogue.com. If we bring smart and good people together, smart and good things happen.
An estate plan would include a will, a financial power of attorney, a healthcare directive, and also a HIPAA authorization form.
Making business decisions from a scarcity mindset. Everything I had, I'm not going to have enough, so I was hoarding a lot of things, and I was